The scream isn't coming from the engine. It's the airframe itself. The Spitfire is howling, an unearthly living sound, like aluminum being tortured at the edge of physics. Squadron leader Anthony Martindale feels it everywhere, through his gloves, up the control stick, into the seat crushing against his spine. This vibration isn't mechanical anymore. It's organic. A violent shudder that suggests the aircraft is trying, desperately, to tear itself apart rivet by rivet. Outside the canopy, the world has dissolved into a smeared wash of gray and brown. The nose is pointed almost straight down. The altimeter needle is spinning so fast it looks unreal, as if it might liquefy and drip off the dial. 600 miles per hour. Maybe more. The instruments say 606, but Martindale no longer fully trusts them. Nothing has ever flown this fast under control. The Supermarine Spitfire was never meant to do this. It was designed to fight at 370 miles per hour, to climb, turn, roll, and dance through the sky like a thoroughbred. Not to plunge headlong into a regime of speed where the rules of flight simply stop applying. Yet here he is. 4 miles above England, April 27, 1944, riding a machine that has crossed into unknown territory. The control stick jitters violently in his hands. Then it begins to stiffen. Not gradually, ominously. Resistance creeps in, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Something is wrong. At these speeds, air no longer behaves like air. It compresses. It stacks. It slams. The wings aren't slicing through the atmosphere anymore. They're colliding with it. Forces are building that want to rip them clean off the fuselage. Martindale knows the theory. The engineers explained it in calm voices over neat graphs, in rooms thick with cigarette smoke and slide rule certainty. But graphs don't scream. Numbers don't rattle your teeth. Equations don't make you wonder if the canopy will implode and turn you into a red smear inside a tumbling shell of metal. 22,000 feet. Then 18. The ground is still far below, but it's rushing closer with terrifying intent. Every instinct in his body is screaming to pull back. To do something. He doesn't. That's the point. The Air Ministry needs data. Fighter Command needs answers. Spitfire pilots have been dying, not from enemy fire, but from dives they can't recover from. Chasing a fleeing German aircraft, pushing past 450, 480, 500 miles per hour, and then the controls freeze. The aircraft stops listening. The dive becomes a coffin. The engineers call it compressibility, a polite word for something that's killing men. So Martindale volunteered. A modified Spitfire. Instruments bolted everywhere. Climb to altitude. Roll inverted. Push the nose straight down. Hold it there. Stay calm while the aircraft tries to shake itself into scrap metal. He isn't suicidal. He's methodical. Even if the difference feels razor-thin inside a cockpit coming apart at the seams. The propeller ahead of him has become a transparent disc. The Merlin engine is screaming at revolutions it was never designed to sustain. Something will fail. He knows that. The only question is what, and whether he'll still be alive when it does. 14,000 feet. The Spitfire is still accelerating. Martindale understands exactly why this matters. German pilots, especially those flying the Focke-Wulf 190, figured this out first. They baited Spitfires into dives, then simply pushed the nose down and escaped. British pilots followed, and vanished. Controls locked. Recovery impossible. Reports piled up. Entered dive. Failed to recover. Control difficulties suspected. Bureaucratic language. Brutal reality. Wind tunnels couldn't replicate it. Models were too small. Speeds too high. The math itself began to break down. By 1943, the problem was critical, affecting British and American fighters alike. The theory was clear enough. At extreme speeds, airflow over parts of the wing reached supersonic velocity. Shock waves formed. Lift collapsed unpredictably. Control surfaces stopped responding. Pilots described it the same way every time. The stick felt welded in place. You could pull with everything you had, and nothing happened. Some survived by throttling back and waiting, watching the altimeter unwind toward zero. Others tried flaps or side slips. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the aircraft tore itself apart. And now Martindale is deep inside that unknown, the controls stiffening further, the Spitfire screaming louder, the ground rising faster. A handful of pilots claimed the aircraft sometimes recovered on its own after plunging into denser air at lower altitudes. No one could explain why. The problem was its unpredictability, and in combat aviation, unpredictability meant death. Wind tunnel tests offered clues but no answers. Scale models showed shock waves forming at high speed, yet the data refused to translate to real aircraft. In the transonic region, that dangerous zone between subsonic and supersonic flight, the relationship between models and full-size machines simply broke down. You could test a 1/10th scale Spitfire wing all day and still have no idea whether the real aircraft would recover or tear itself apart. By early 1944, evidence pointed to a critical threshold around Mach 0.84, roughly 570 miles per hour at altitude. But around wasn't good enough. The Air Ministry needed exact numbers. When control stiffening began, how severe the buffet became, how much structural margin remained, and most importantly, whether a pilot could pull out alive without superhuman strength or blind luck. That meant instrumentation. Accelerometers, pressure sensors, strain gauges, cameras filming the dials mid-dive. All of it added weight, reducing maneuverability, but without it the data would be meaningless. And it meant finding a pilot willing to become a moving experiment. Squadron leader Anthony Francis Martindale was an unlikely volunteer. Quiet, analytical, an engineer before the war. But he also had over 1,000 hours in Spitfires and a reputation for calm under pressure. Where others returned from flights talking about combat, Martindale returned with notes on control forces and engine behavior. Test flying suited him. Observation mattered more than bravado. When the Farnborough team explained the task, Martindale didn't hesitate. He asked about the instruments, and when they wanted to start. Other pilots thought he was mad. Diving a Spitfire toward 600 miles per hour wasn't testing. It was Russian roulette. But Martindale saw it differently. Pilots were dying because no one understood compressibility. Someone had to gather the data properly. Weeks of preparation followed. The modified Spitfire was tested again and again. Martindale flew practice dives, gradually pushing from 300 to 400 to 500 miles per hour, learning the warning signs. Each flight edged closer to the unknown. Then came a clear April morning. The aircraft was ready. The instruments were calibrated. Martindale climbed to 27,500 feet and leveled off. This was where test flying stopped being technical and became personal. He rolled inverted and pushed forward into the dive. The Spitfire accelerated relentlessly. 300 miles per hour. 400. 450. The controls grew heavier. The airframe hummed. At 500 miles per hour, buffeting began. At 550, the wings flexed visibly. At 580 miles per hour, the stick vibrated violently. Control response faded. This was the compressibility zone pilots feared. At just over 600 miles per hour, something failed. Not explosively, but catastrophically. The reduction gearbox disintegrated. The propeller tore free and vanished past the canopy. In an instant, the Spitfire lost its nose weight, the engine oversped wildly, and Martindale shut it down by instinct alone. Now the aircraft was a crippled glider. Coolant sprayed across the windscreen. Fuel leaked into the fuselage. The nose shook violently, instruments unreadable. And he was still diving. At 12,000 feet, Martindale hauled back on the stick with everything he had. The Spitfire protested, groaned, but slowly leveled out. He was alive. But the engine was dead. The aircraft badly damaged. And Farnborough was 60 miles away. By the numbers, he wouldn't make it. Not even close. Martindale scanned the countryside below, calculating glide distance, wind drift, and remaining options. Any field might do. The data had already been gathered. Saving the aircraft was optional. Saving himself would be nice. But something in his engineer's mind wasn't finished yet. The wind was from the west. The airframe, despite everything, was still clean. And Martindale began to wonder if the mathematics, like the wind tunnel data before it, might still be lying. The winds helped him. With no flaps down and no landing gear creating drag, the Spitfire was as clean as it could be. Martindale was still high enough to experiment, trading altitude for distance in careful steps. He trimmed for minimum sink rate, finding the narrow balance where the aircraft descended slowly but kept enough speed for control. At 120 miles per hour indicated, the nose sat slightly down. The variometer showed a descent of about 800 feet per minute. Not ideal, but manageable. The vibration never stopped. Every few minutes it worsened, and each time Martindale waited for something critical to fail. But the airframe held. An aircraft that had survived 606 miles per hour wasn't going to fall apart quietly now. At 10,000 feet, the ground came into sharp focus. Fields, villages, roads like gray threads. Navigation was easy. A railway line ran southeast toward Farnborough. Follow that. Keep the glide disciplined. Trust the numbers. At 9,000 feet, the fuel smell grew stronger. Something was still leaking. One spark and the Spitfire would become a fireball. He pushed the thought aside. At 8,000 feet, he realized he was covering more distance than expected. The westerly wind was carrying him, stretching the glide closer to 10:1. Odium Airfield passed beneath him. Farnborough was still possible. At 7,000 feet, the vibration surged violently. Metal groaned. The aircraft yawed left from uneven drag. Martindale corrected with rudder and held it steady. At 6,000 feet, the countryside gained texture. Trees, hedgerows, streams. Still time. At 5,000 feet, Farnborough appeared ahead. Hangars. Runways. He was going to make it. Barely, but enough. By 4,000 feet, the tower would have seen him. A Spitfire approaching without a propeller didn't need a radio call. Emergency crews would already be moving. At 3,000 feet, it was time to focus on landing. No engine. A damaged nose. One attempt only. At 2,000 feet, Martindale reached for the manual undercarriage pump. Without engine hydraulics, it took effort. 30 hard strokes. His arm burned. The indicators showed the wheels locking down. 3 green lights. At 1,000 feet, he turned on to final. The approach was steep. Without power, there would be no second chance. The boundary fence passed beneath him. The runway filled his vision. The Spitfire touched down hard but straight. Martindale held the stick back, let the speed bleed away, waited, then gently applied the brakes. The aircraft rolled to a stop. He shut everything down and climbed out onto the wing. Engineers were already running toward him, eyes fixed not on the missing propeller, but on the instruments. The data they recovered changed everything. The onset of compressibility. The exact control forces. Where shock waves formed. How much punishment the wings could take. Most importantly, it proved recovery was possible. Difficult, exhausting, but achievable. Pilots were briefed immediately. Don't panic. Don't bail out. Pull with everything you have and hold it. The aircraft will respond. Later Spitfires benefited directly. Stronger reduction gears. Improved elevator controls. Subtle aerodynamic refinements. RAF pilots gained new options against faster enemy aircraft. The findings fed into jet research. Control loads, structural limits, pilot endurance. Knowledge gathered not from theory, but from one man riding a machine beyond its limits and coming back with answers. Martindale never sought fame. He accepted the Air Force Cross quietly and returned to his work. Among engineers and test pilots, though, the dive became legendary. The Spitfire had proven something profound. Designed when 300 miles per hour seemed extraordinary, it had survived more than double that speed. The propeller failed. The airframe did not. One aircraft. One pilot. One dive at 606 miles per hour. And knowledge pulled back from the edge of the unknown.